Thank you, Supriya, and welcome to all of you who have joined in from across the United States. We are going to keep this at a very fast pace, but I do advise you to send in questions through the question applet on the on your webinar box there, so that we can answer your specific questions throughout this presentation. I'm going to begin with a story. 7 years ago, I met Mark Maston, a former General Electric executive who had just been hired by Roll Global to lead global pistachio sales. Mark had spent some time in India and felt that India was ready for California pistachios. And over the next 5 years, we introduced Paramount Farms and their wonderful pistachio brand, as well as their wholesale product across India. We brought Mark to the wholesale distribution market, Khadi Bawli in Old Delhi, where nuts have been traded for centuries. And today, Paramount Farms has been able to displace as well the Irani legacy, as well as expand the overall market for pistachio nuts considerably. Roll Global owns 75,000 acres of pistachio orchards here in California. And today their product is available in over 12,000 outlets all across India. We think that they have just started to scrape the surface, and we expect that their sales will go up tenfold over the next 5 years. Mark was recently my guest at an event here in Cerritos where he spoke about the journey with us and on their own building their brand in India. At the bottom right, you see a photograph of their small roasting plant that they have set up in Vadodara in Gujarat, in Western India, and they soon expect to expand that to something significantly larger. If you'd like a link to his talk, please send an email to usa@amrit.com at the end of this presentation, and you can learn a lot more about it. We are going to go through a quick introduction, then we'll get into the 4P's as promised. If we have time, we will discuss some of the specific challenges in India, but I'd much rather discuss your questions and your challenges if you want to present any of them. And then we'll have a short slide on takeaways from this presentation. The reasons why India is important to all of you on this call are listed here. And let me just focus on the middle section. While the Indian economy is growing at 6 to 9%, the consumer goods market in India is largely growing much faster than that, definitely at double-digit rates, and in some cities as high as 20% per year. The prediction by all of the major consulting firms and research providers is that by 2025, India will definitely be among the top 5 consumer markets in the world. So a very steep growth curve is expected for all players in India. And the good news is that American companies are now starting to win in this market, which was historically much more dominated by European entities. We feel that we are at a turning point today, and the decisions that each of you make in this year, in 2012, will be key to your long-term success in India. This is a slide that is about 5 or 6 years old from a Morgan Stanley research report, which shows a predictable S-curve for emerging countries and their growth over time. On the x-axis, they are plotting the years from the beginning of economic progress. On the y-axis, they are plotting the adjusted per capita income, per capita GDP, adjusted for purchasing power parity. So you will see at the top right are countries such as Hong Kong and Japan, which began their expansion really after the Second World War, and have been through this for many years, and so they are starting to approach Western levels and stabilize their income. Whereas at the bottom of the curve are countries such as India, the Philippines, and so on. And China is about 10 years ahead of India because it began liberalizing in 1978, whereas India began liberalizing in 1991. So this message is again similar to what I said on the previous slide, that you can expect a very steep growth curve, even though the beginning first year or two may be somewhat slow. Another very important factor that people forget when they are talking about the so-called BRIC countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, is that nowhere in the world will American companies encounter as welcoming an audience as welcoming a consumer market as India. And this is very plainly brought out in studies by the Pew Center that they run every other year across 16 countries. But here I'm quoting you a study run by the research firm Ipsos around the time of the last presidential elections. And you will see that people from India felt positively about the United States far more so than Brazilians at 36%, than the Chinese down at 34%, and the Russians down all the way at 23%. So the attitude that you will encounter towards your products and services and your brands is far more positive in India than almost anywhere else in the world. You know about Amrit. I'm sure you've looked at our website before registering, so I won't dwell on this. Our core business is helping Western companies to become successful in India. And currently we have a tremendous focus on the CPG market because we believe that American companies are underrepresented in India's consumer market. I'm now going to hand this over to my colleague Debu Bhatnagar in New Delhi. Debu, go ahead.
Thank you, Gunjan. Some of the factors which are creating this huge upsurge in the Indian consumer market are related to the demographics of the country. You all know it's a very big market, but it's also a country which has got a very large urban population who lives in cities, as much as 286 million, and it's a very young country, with most of India being only about 25 years old. It's a complex country with a lot of dialects and languages, but business is run in English, which is a little different from the way it's spoken in the US of A, but still it's understandable. In the major urban cities of India, you will find that the 6 major cities account for as much as 60 million people. And the key cities of Mumbai, Delhi, which is the national capital, and the 3 southern metros of Chennai, Bangalore, and Hyderabad, along with Kolkata, which is in the east, where we see relatively slower progress. These major cities account for a large chunk of the Indian population. Can I have the next slide, please? Yeah. If you look at the CPG system in India, some of the multinationals who have been here for a long time are from Europe. The largest of them all, being far larger than almost everybody else there, is Unilever, which has a turnover of almost $4.5 billion in India alone. Nestle and the India Tobacco Company, which is now called ITC, only the consumer goods part of it are actually some of the big ones. Homegrown companies are following pretty hard on their heels and are actually becoming bigger and bigger and starting to create a niche for themselves. The other big one here is Colgate-Palmolive, which is around 390 million. Pepsi and Coke are also quite big in India, and since they operate through distributors, the distributor turnover is the one which really gets captured, and that's quite big as well. As Gunjan mentioned earlier, American products are quite popular with young people and lifestyle seekers, and that's a major factor in how these brands are actually picking up. Can we shift the slide, please? Yeah. Looking at some examples of American companies and their success in India, one example is Johnson & Johnson, who've been actually in India for a very long time. They operate in 3 main sectors and have now become a major household name in middle-class India with their products in the baby care area, as well as the products for brands like Band-Aid and Stay-Free sanitary napkins. So that's a major example of how American companies have been very successful in India. Next, please. Can I have the next slide, please?
Should be up.
Yeah, I got it. Thank you. There are a few factors which are actually fueling this major growth in the CPG market. One, of course, is familiar, which is that the per capita income is rising rapidly. and at 6 to 9% is probably the second fastest amongst major countries in the world after China. The second factor we talked about is rapid urbanization, with a lot of people moving to the cities as growth and job opportunities build there. The third reason is, of course, that India is a very young country, and it has a long way to go in terms of these young people becoming major consumers of brands. And the last thing, of course, is that there is a lot of aspiration in India. It's also related to being a young country. And this whole point about the glamour of the film industry and things of that nature are becoming a major factor in driving consumption levels through, especially for CPG products. Next slide, please. Another example of a company which has been established in India for a long while is Colgate-Palmolive. It's a highly responsive company, very, very focused on consumers in the country, and is a well-established market leader in the toothpaste segment until Unilever started actually also attacking them in 1998. But subsequently, they've picked their share back, and an example of a new kind of development is the launch of the Sensitive Pro Relief toothpaste, which has quickly become a number one player in the sensitivity segment. Very good marketing practices and very responsive to the Indian consumer. May I have the next slide, please? Looking at one particular part of the CPG market, which is the personal care market, it's really very interesting and growing very rapidly. Currently valued at about $6.3 billion in sales and growing rapidly at 13+%. It has very low penetration and consumption levels today, and it would take some time for this consumption level to catch up with international levels, which gives it a lot of headroom in terms of the way that these markets can grow over the next several years. So, all in all, the market for the CPG industry is highly attractive, growing rapidly, and with a lot of headroom for growth as we go along. I'll now hand you back to Gunjan to take you through the other part of the agenda.
Thank you so much, Debu. And gentlemen, you're seeing somewhat of a delay as we switch slides because Debu is halfway across the world in New Delhi, and I'm here in Los Angeles with a 12.5-hour time difference. And thanks to the internet, we can actually be doing this at the same time. But I just wanted to explain those delays that you might be seeing. So I am going to want to get a little bit of an understanding of our audience. So I'm going to run an interactive poll. You should see on your screen the question, what might be your greatest obstacle in India? And there's 4 choices. If you would take a minute to pick the one that you think might apply in your situation. And if 2 are very close, just pick one that you think might be more of a challenge. If you have already taken the poll, what I would suggest is take a moment to send us any questions through the question box on the applet. I'm going to allow just a few more seconds for anyone else to take the poll. Let's share the results. I think you should see on your screen that 40% of you chose making a profit at a price that Indians will pay, and 60% of you chose grappling with distribution challenges. And both of those are very significant, and Debu and I will make sure that we address them as we go through the presentation. But let me hide that and move on to the 4P's applied to India. And I will cover the first couple, and then Debu will take over from me once more. So here's an example of a client who came to us a couple of years ago, and their sales projections were considerably below what they had projected. They had entered the Indian market with just a small handful of SKUs, and so their international sales head, their vice president of international sales, came to us and says, "Hey, tell us what we might have done wrong." We went through an analysis and evaluation, and I'm sorry I cannot share the product category or company because of confidentiality reasons. So some of this is a little bit vague, but I think it's still important to understand that we found that their pricing was appropriate for the Indian market, and it did allow for enough profit margin. Their promotion was appropriate because they really weren't thinking of television or print or broadcast advertising of any kind. It was really all about point of sale, and they had done a pretty good job of that in the retail outlets we visited compared to their peer products. We did find that their distribution was limited, but that had already been considered in making their sales projections, so we didn't think the answer was simply to add more distributors. Our troubleshooting then focused really on the product itself. We felt that people were trying the product but were not coming back to buy it in a repeat situation often. Our initial analysis inside our company showed that, but we wanted to make sure that we could validate this across a wider demographic, so we ran a series of focus groups in a number of cities, and it turned out that there was just one key feature in the product that they had actually added for another ethnic market, and they assumed that this is the way people outside the United States would like their product. In fact, that very feature, which was costing them about 6% of the overall cost of the product, was the one inhibiting Indian buyers from really enjoying or liking the product. So our recommendation was really very simple, to introduce into India the SKUs that didn't have this added feature or ingredient. And that factor alone took their repeat purchases from relatively low levels to significantly higher, and caused a dramatic increase in sales over the months that followed. Of course, implementing this in a phased manner and getting rid of the inventory that they had already built up took some time. But once they realized that this was the problem, it became very easy to take the fix and apply it. Let's talk about some examples from the public domain that we can speak more freely about. Tupperware entered India a while ago, and some of their best-selling products are derived specifically for the Indian market and specifically focus on advantages over the traditional offering. So in every Indian kitchen, you will find a box right next to the stove or oven where the person cooking the food keeps all their spices. And typically, historically in India, these boxes have been made of stainless steel, and there's a lid. But of course, stainless steel lids aren't really airtight, so Tupperware introduced an Indian spice box, and the main feature that they emphasize is that this is airtight, and therefore the flavors in the spices last longer, and you end up having better value from what you keep in there. They're not selling this on price, they're not selling it on anything else. It's just that one factor that is making housewives across India try out the Tupperware spice box. Down below you have a lunch carrier, a lunch box, or a tiffin box as they call them in India, and it's designed for the kind of dry food that and a chapati bread that is eaten in northern India. This probably wouldn't sell as well in southern India, where often people will take a liquid like sambar or rasam with them to lunch. This compartmentalized system wouldn't really work as effectively to prevent the bread or the rice from getting soaked. So it's more of a regional offering. So our takeaway for you for the product portion is that you must consider making your products ready for the Indian market. And you must recognize that India is not a monolithic market. You must sell to the various demographic segments within India. India has many ethnicities, many religions, many regions, many tastes. You can split it by economics, by ethnicity, and so on. And so you will end up having quite a series of offerings in the Indian market. When Amway entered India, a company that typically sells products in large and larger, they found that the only way that they could succeed in India was to offer many multiple sizes, given the nature of the Indian household and the way that they buy. Today, Amway is selling $400 million a year of product and has publicly announced that they expect to double that soon. I could go on with the examples. I've got a picture on the right of the Kurkure brand, which is a Frito-Lay brand offered only in India, and these are spicy snacks. If you're ever in India, look at these being offered at any of the small point-of-sale shops. There'll be ribbons of these hanging on the side, and there's quite a variety of product that they offer. For folks in the personal care business, you'll want to modify your products to have fragrances that Indians appreciate. Some of the floral, jasmine, other herbal types of fragrances, I think, are very highly valued. India is also a society that is frugal, and so reusable containers are often a big selling point for consumer products, where you not only buy the product to enjoy, but you can put the container, which might be plastic or whatever material, you can put the container to some other use, and these are often offered as promos. Let me switch to the next P, promotion or advertising. And I have an example here of an ad, a print ad by a company called Dabur. Dabur is India's largest consumer product company that is homegrown. You might have seen it on the list that Debu brought up earlier. And here you will see that they are running an ad that has a mixture of both English as well as India's most common language, Hindi. You will see that just above the word Vatika, it says Naya, which means new. And then down below the picture of the girl, again, it has a mixture of Hindi and English. And essentially, it's saying that your face will glow so that you will really begin thinking about it. And this kind of mixed language advertising works in parts of India. Clearly, there are many parts where Hindi is not spoken, and an ad like this would fall flat on its face. So you've got to use it in the right place. You will also see such kinds of entries on Dabur's website. Now, here's another ad that might surprise you. Most people think of India as a very conservative country, and in many ways, the mores around the exposure of skin and clothing are very conservative. But this doesn't mean that it's conservative all the way. Here is an ad for a condom product called Kohinoor, taken from a mainstream household magazine, and you will see not only is the picture quite provocative, so is the text. This would not attract any great attention in India. I can see that you can well imagine that both the idea of condoms as well as an ad that shows that exposes so much shoulder could be considered controversial in the United States today in certain kinds of media publications. So my lesson really from this is that India will continue to surprise you in ways that you might not expect. So I've learned to question all my assumptions about India as I travel there and as I take my clients there, and we are headed over to India very soon with one of our significant clients, and I expect that their senior executives will go through some learning about what to expect and what not to expect and how to be surprised. So my takeaway for you about promotion and advertising in India is that it is very, very specific to the Indian market. There are few messages from your global markets that will translate into India. There's a few slogans that might carry over, but by and large, you will find that you are much better off turning to Indian advertising agencies who are truly world-class. Every year they win awards for their television, print, and radio advertising at global competitions. You also need to keep in mind that in India, it's not just about new media. All media in India is growing. Uh, sure, television and radio are growing, billboards are growing, but India is one of the few places in the world where newspapers are finding an increasing market, and this is driven by two factors. Number one, as literacy in India increases, the newly literate want to read newspapers because that's what they see people more affluent than them doing. And it's also growing because of the young demographic that Debu mentioned. In most major cities you will find many newspapers, even in the English language and also in the local language. So here in the Los Angeles area, we have one English language newspaper. Mumbai probably has 6 of them. The largest circulating newspaper in India, in the world today, is the Dainik Jagran, published out of my native town of Kanpur, and they have 14 editions across the country. Picture at the bottom I have is one from one of the most famous billboard campaigns that has been running now for almost 40 years. It's a company called Amul, and every 2 weeks they put up a new billboard, which is usually around a political or current news item. They're always edgy. They go where most marketers would not go in terms of political sensitivity and controversy. So here is an ad which actually mentions Osama bin Laden. This is from about 3 years ago, and in the interest of time, I won't explain the ad. But if you want, you can send me an email, and I'll send you a link to their whole library of billboards from the last many years, and I think you'll have some fun understanding India through the lens of those very controversial and entertaining billboards. When you look at distribution in India, you will find the equivalents of the Krogers and the Walmarts, but far more important to your marketing and distribution in India are what is referred to in India as the traditional retail. So on the right here, we have a picture of a display inside a supermarket. And as you walk the supermarket, you might feel like it looks like a Kroger or a Tesco, and the products are arranged around aisles, and you push your shopping cart through. This happens to be a picture of a Paramount Farms display that they put up. Now, Paramount gets less than 5% of its sales through these displays. They are really much more of a visibility kind of thing for them to display their product and make people aware of it. Most of their sales today, 95% of Paramount sales today, come from what I call traditional outlets, like the one pictured on the left. And there are about 6 million of these across India. They range from anywhere from 1,000 square feet down to as little as 25 or 30 square feet, with a guy standing behind a counter or sitting behind a counter, as you see here. And these come across in many flavors. I want to end this portion of my talk with this great set of pictures. You will see that product moves from point A to point B in overloaded trucks, in tricycles carrying eggs, in little scooters that offer home delivery of your McDonald's or other product. But take a minute to look at the picture at the bottom. We're going to talk about Pepsi in a minute, and so you'd think that my reason for showing you this picture is the Pepsi truck here. But in India, you have to learn to look carefully. And I want to draw your attention to this guy here on the tricycle. While Pepsi is supplying its product on the truck, you see this little tricycle, and the product's loaded there, and the guy is getting ready to make a delivery. And much of your product will be delivered to India through multiple levels. And I will let Debu explain that to you. So I'm going to hand it back to Debu Bhatnagar.
Gunjan mentioned the point about Pepsi, and I think Pepsi has been one of the most successful American companies in establishing a very wide-scale distribution right through the country. Today, Pepsi drink distributors cater to all towns with a population of over 5,000, and the number of such markets would be well over about 5 or 6,000. So you can well imagine how widespread this distribution is. They sell drinks in disposable bottles, in cans, in Tetra bricks for juices, and also returnable glass bottles. And in order to cater to the returnable glass bottles, they have developed collection mechanisms for bringing these glass bottles back from all these places where they are distributed to. The bottles are then washed and reused, like typically what happens with a glass bottle distribution. But you can imagine the length and breadth of this enterprise throughout the country. Apart from the drinks distribution of Pepsi, they also have snack foods, which are the Frito-Lay division. And the Frito-Lay division actually caters to an even wider range of products. And as you can see from the cursor, you will find that in these small outlets, you have little bags of potato chips, which are hung from these little display units, from which they are then torn and sold to each consumer as he comes along. So this is a mammoth enterprise. And I think one of the key reasons for Pepsi's success is their excellent distribution system. And it's fair to say that Coke is not far behind, is almost equally good. And as you will see in the second picture, you will find that wherever there's Pepsi, there's Coke. And this is the way that these two have been slugging it out in the market. Can we change slides, please?
There we go.
Thank you. Another example of a very different kind is Amway. Amway was a late entrant into India and came in only in 1995. It offers a fairly wide range of products, including personal care, home care, as well as for commercial products. And they quickly actually figured out that mail order shopping would not work. There are many reasons for this. One is that it's difficult from a logistics point of view to deliver products right across the country, and a variety of other things, including the low literacy levels of people. Now they have 4 regional warehouses, 55 city warehouses, and close to 3,000 logistic partner locations. You can well imagine that this turnover is actually coming from a very, very wide range of Amway distribution partners. They've done very well, and they've got a turnover of close to about 400 million, and they are now in the middle of expanding capacity in order to double India's sales. So it's an excellent example of a company which adapted its normal distribution practices to cater to what would be more acceptable to the Indian consumer, and having done very well with that. Can we switch the slide, please?
There you are.
As Gunjan mentioned to you, actually the distribution pattern in India is pretty complicated. There are multiple layers of distribution. Usually goods move from the factories to a central warehouse, from where they could move to a subsidiary warehouse and then to a distributor. This is on account of the fact that one is that it's a large country, 2, that the times taken for goods to be transited are quite large, and thirdly, there are issues of interstate sales and some taxes which go along with that. So people prefer to transfer goods to their own locations and then move from there to a distributor. A company like Pepsi or Unilever would have thousands of distributors which would be actually handling this system. Distribution at the last leg could be by truck, by cart, or sometimes even by camel cart. So you do need very good packaging to make sure that it stands up to it. In many cases, the small shops which Gunjan showed you in some of the earlier slides also do home delivery. And it's now quite the norm in a lot of Indian cities for consumers to ring up the nearest shopkeeper, and he will send a boy across to your house with the goods which you've ordered. And that really makes the service level which is very difficult to beat. As we discussed, there are emerging direct sales, for example, Amway and Avon, and also companies like Oriflame, which is a European multinational, which have got into this and have been doing quite well. Can we move to the next slide, please?
Yes, the next slide is up.
The other point about pricing, which has, I think, has come up in one of the questions which were there in this webinar. One is that for products to succeed in India, I think it's very important to take out any unnecessary cost. Many of you would have read the story about the world's cheapest car, which was produced by the Tatas, called Nano. And when it actually came out, it had a price of around $2,000. And a lot of people were very skeptical that a car could actually be produced for that kind of price and still make a profit. But yes, that's an example of frugal engineering or frugal product design, which actually adds considerably to the ability of the Indian consumer to buy that. Example, of course, of that is of Procter & Gamble, where currently, in fact, they've been doing this for a long time now, that they have a single-use sachet pack for shampoos, which would be at 6 cents for Pantene and Head & Shoulders, their major brands. And that actually makes a huge difference in terms of the way that they are able to address the market. At this point in time, close to 60% of the entire Indian sales of shampoo actually come from these single-use sachets, which is a very large number. Also, they are continuously looking at ways of offering more value to the consumer, and in fact went through a price reduction of almost 20 to 40% in 2004 in order to get to the price points which would be more comfortable to the Indian consumer. So pricing is a major factor and is a very important factor in India. And we have to look at all sorts of ways, including the product features which we are offering, as well as the pack sizes, and a whole lot of other things to make sure that we are able to get the pricing right. Can we move to the next slide, please? I'll now hand you back to Gunjan. I'm sorry, there is one slide more which I'd just like to talk about. This is an example of technology, where this is a company which is really a company into tobacco. And from tobacco, they decided to move into mainstream consumer products because the tobacco markets are not growing as they are indeed anywhere in the world. And they've used a route where they've tried to use technology which looks and feels different from what would be the normal kind of product available in the market. They've also highlighted issues like US collaboration to give that kind of support and feel of technology, which is important for their particular product offering. Can we move to the next slide, please?
Yeah, you have one more, Debo.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we've already talked a bit about this. We have talked about the fact that defeatured products are the ones where you really would get high volumes. But do remember that India is a stratified market. You will find that there are high-end cars like a Mercedes or a BMW on the roads, but the larger market is clearly for the low-price stripped-down products, for example, the Tata Nano, which we talked about. ITC personal care, as we had looked at earlier about the technology end of it, which is the Fiamma DeVille story. But at the other side, they have three different price ranges which cater to different price points for the Indian consumer. I think the important point which is being made is that India has all kinds of consumers. They have people who are rich, they're poor, and they're medium. And all these segments are growing, so it depends on really what you want to do in terms of catering to them. And I think another point which is important is that if you are trying to address the premium end of the market, you will find that the Indian consumer at that end is extremely demanding. They would want on-site service, special access, for example, in banking services, doorstep banking, saying that, we will actually send somebody over to your house to do whatever, banking requirements you've got. So it's a stratified market. There are consumers at all ends of the spectrum. Large volumes will come from the bottom end of the market, but at the same time, there is plenty of scope for tackling the premium end as well. Can we move to the next slide, please?
Perfect. Thank you so much, Debu. And
yeah,
what I'd like to do now is see if we can run one more poll, get a better idea of our questions, and we'll move to a more interactive portion after this. So tell us what your current method is for accessing the Indian market. And again, if you have more than one, just choose the one that's more dominant or the one that you expect will be more active. While we are doing this, I also want to remind everyone that this is a great time to send in questions. Supriya, are we seeing any questions coming through?
Yeah, we have a couple. You can take that whenever you have time
All right.
or at the end of the...
Let's just wait until this poll is over. I see some stragglers who are just trying to figure out how to vote. So we have an interesting audience. It looks like 60% of the people have no presence in India right now. And the balance... I can show the poll. 1 second. Look at it. So 60% don't have a presence, and the balance are divided between just a single partner and a joint venture entity. Okay, there's nobody who really has their own staff. Now, this is, again, function of the kind of people who have registered for this webinar. Doesn't mean that this is necessarily the pattern you'll see for successful companies in India. Let's close that, and Supriya, can you tell us what questions we have from the audience at this time?
Yes, and again, I would like to remind everyone to please send us your questions via the applet. This is a great opportunity for you to raise any issues that you think of with respect to this topic to our two experts online right now. So one of the questions I think came up earlier based on sort of the language issue, Gunjan. I think they saw the different screens with multiple languages, and the attendee is wondering which language should the products be labeled in, since people speak so many different languages in India.
I think that's a great question. So in India, there are 23 official languages, and many of them are spoken by tens of millions of people. Hindi is spoken by about 40% of the country, but then you have Bengali and Gujarati and Marathi and Punjabi, and they're all spoken by tens of millions of people. If you look at the 100 rupee bill or note, as it's called in India, or the 1,000 rupee note or bill, you will see that the amount of the currency is listed in about 13 different scripts. These languages, not only are they different from each other, they are written in different scripts. So they are not just as different as, say, English is from Portuguese. They're as different, say, as English is from Chinese or Russian. So you can't even read the letters. So what do you do if you have a product that fits in the palm of your hand? And I will let Debu answer that.
Actually, the route which everyone follows here, and it's not only the multinational companies, is that most of the labeling is in English. And there are a few examples of regional products which may be selling in a particular region and therefore would tend to use the regional language. But if there is a product which is looking at a national distribution, the labeling would be in English. That's the normal practice which is followed in India.
And so the implied message within that is, of course, if the person doesn't read English, how do they know what product is what? And the important part is to have your logos and your branding very, very clear, so that your product is instantly visually recognizable as being that, that wonderful pistachio or that Tide soap, even to somebody who cannot read the letters TIDE. Do we have another question?
Yes. Do you want to take it now or?
Yeah, let's take one more right now.
Sure. So somebody is asking, we only have one dealer in India. Is that sufficient?
Great question. What do you think, Debu?
Well, if I was to give a simple answer, I would say probably not, because India is a very big country, and most dealers or distributors would not really have very good quality reach or the ability to get to the market effectively beyond a geography which is limited to where they are largely located. So, in general, without being, taking a specific position on this, I would say that one is not enough for looking at a country as big as India.
I absolutely agree with that, Debu. In fact, I would go so further and say if I'm thinking of writing an article on the top 10 mistakes people make in distributing consumer product to India, and among the top 3 or 4 will be the idea that you are at a trade show in Paris or Dubai, and this person walks up to you from India at this company, and 3 executives from it come to you and they say, well, we have a long legacy in India, and we want to be your exclusive representative in India, and we can do all these great and wonderful things for you. I'd say 90% of the time, maybe 99.8% of the time, those great and wonderful things fail to materialize. And it's not because the distributor or partner is not a good partner. It's just that their stated ambition exceeds their actual capability. It's also perhaps that they weren't the right partner for this client to begin with, and they just happened to be in Dubai or Paris without much due diligence. If you choose a partner without a thorough analysis of the alternatives available, I think you are almost guaranteed to not have an optimal setup. Now, this seems so obvious and trite, but the only reason I make this point is that there are so many instances where we have this happen. And when I ask people why they take these kinds of choices, a lot of it just has to do with the fact that for most Western companies and American companies in particular, India is distant and unfamiliar. And so if someone comes to you and says, hey, I can take care of India for you, then it's one less place I have to worry about. And and they sound very compelling, they speak fluent English, it seems like it's the logical way to go. We get a lot of assignments from people who have done that, and then 3 and 4 years later, they say, where is this huge market? I'm not getting any of it. Well, it's not always the fault of the Indian market. You will see that companies like Amway and P&G and Unilever are all doing tremendously well. There's a huge market waiting for most American companies if they do take the time and effort to listen carefully. That's a long answer to a simple question, but I wanted to emphasize this fact because it's something that comes up so often in our consulting and advice. And when we take on an engagement, we will typically do quite a bit of research and analysis before recommending a distribution strategy for a particular client, because not everybody should have the same answer. Let me go through some of the other challenges, and I encourage you to submit your questions. We are running pretty close to the end of the time here, so I'll go through this very quickly. As I travel with American executives in India, this is one of the points I emphasize. Don't jump to conclusions about India. Your first conclusion will probably be wrong, and your second one might be wrong as well. Let me just focus your attention to the picture on the bottom right. This was taken in the city of Mysore. And I do this almost every time I speak in person, because you see the sign that says the Palmyra tenements. And in America, people associate the word tenements with project, low-end housing. Right below that, it says resorts and accommodation. So you see this apparent conflict. How can a tenement also claim to be a resort? And the first assumption for anybody from the West is, well, these guys in Mysore, of course, don't speak English as their native language, so they clearly don't understand the meaning of the word tenement, and they have misused it. In fact, even though I'm characterized as the India expert, that was my first conclusion when I jumped out of the car to take this picture. But shortly after taking the picture, I went to dictionary.com on my BlackBerry and looked up the meaning of the word tenement and found that it literally means multi-unit housing or condominium or apartment housing. The color that is attached to it relating to low-end housing really began in the New York area and the East Coast in the early 20th century, as a lot of those tenements were built for so-called project housing. And so this is a relatively recent phenomenon, a recent way in which Americans have used the word. But for people in India, it's perfectly okay to consider this word in the context that you see it. And I have experiences like this almost every time I travel to India and I'm in business situations. I point this to my clients to be really, really careful. Let's jump to another challenge. Debu referred to what is called Indian English, and I think it's important that you realize that while you can understand the Indians, they speak English, but they don't think American. And this alone could be the subject of a day-long workshop, so I will just leave it at that, and I encourage you to go to the Amrit's website, and there's a section called Indian English, and we've got about 700 words from so-called Indian English language that are used somewhat differently from what you will find in the US, and I think you'll have some fun there. Remember that when you go to India as an American company, you are the underdog. There are dominant companies such as we mentioned here, Unilever and Nestle from overseas. There are large Indian players that understand the local market well enough that they can spin circles around you. So you really have to do a lot of naive listening and thinking. And if you do that, though, you will find that the Indian market will tell you everything you need to know, and you can respond to that and be successful. So these are not insurmountable barriers by any means. Let's move to our final takeaways. So, in conclusion, as you've seen, the Indian market is large and it's growing rapidly. It will continue to do so for the next 10 to 15 years. There may be slight hiccups now and then if there's a very bad monsoon or there's an economic crisis, but you'll find that even though hiccups are small, India barely noticed what happened to the rest of the world in 2008. Their GDP continued going up. Our 4P's of marketing still apply in India, but they apply somewhat differently. The manifestation definitely requires some degree of customization and adjustment. And unlike some of the other BRIC countries which put barriers against foreign entrants, we find that in the consumer markets in particular, foreign companies can be extremely successful and can do extremely well. It may take a little longer than being able to enter a market such as Taiwan or South Africa. Then that's because of the complexity in India and because of the distance, cultural distance that American companies sometimes have to deal with. But these are the areas where an expert third party who's used to doing this can accelerate your success. More importantly, an expert third party can reduce the number of mistakes you might make going to India. Somebody like Amrit or another company that does our kind of work has made the mistakes on other people's dime, and so you will make less mistakes on your own dime by having someone like us involved. Supriya, are there more questions at this time?
Yeah, we have a couple, but I think we're running short on time, so I'm going to take one last one, and we can answer the rest via email. The last question we have is it a good idea to manufacture in India for export to Asia, Africa, and Australia?
So this often comes up because people in the past have looked at putting up manufacturing in China, and now manufacturing in India is becoming, much more mainstream across many, many industries. We've seen more and more that there are consumer products that can be manufactured effectively in India for distribution in that part of the world. For some, depending on the weight of the product and the price point, sometimes it makes sense only to distribute in South Asia, meaning countries such as Sri Lanka, where Debu spent 7 years, in Bangladesh, and perhaps even Pakistan through Dubai and other places. Sometimes it makes sense to go through a broader footprint. In my book, I talked about how Hyundai is making cars in India and selling them as far away as Europe. In fact, they've shut down some production lines in Korea, and they're using their Indian factory to ship product all the way to Europe. But Debu, do you want to add something to that?
Oh, I think that's a fair question. I think Indian manufacturing is certainly coming of age now, and there are a number of companies which are using this route to look at the Eastern market. So yes, this could be an interesting possibility as we go along.
Terrific. So our phone number and contact email address is here. If you want to receive any of the materials we referred to, or if you have other questions, please send them to us by email, and Debu and or I will respond to them in due time. And I will hand you back now to Supriya to close out the webinar. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Gunjan, and thank you, Debu, for your participation today. And thank you, everyone, for attending the webinar. We hope it was informative. If you have any additional questions, please do email us at usa@amrit.com, and that address is up on the screen. Please make sure as you exit the webinar that you complete a brief survey that we would like to send your way, and we appreciate your feedback. If you have any friends or colleagues who you think might benefit from a similar webinar, please have them register on our website, www.amrit.com, and we will notify them of any upcoming webinars. Thank you very much for attending today, and have a nice day. Goodbye.